The day my daughter got married was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. I had spent months preparing everything, every detail, every expense, every silent sacrifice, just to see her smile. I paid for the venue, the decorations, the catering. Even things no one noticed. Because when you're a father, you don't count what you give. You just give and hope one day it means something. The venue looked perfect. White flowers everywhere, soft music playing. Guests laughing like nothing in the world could go wrong. And for a moment, I believed it. I stood there watching my daughter walk into her new life. Thinking all those years of hard work. All the overtime shifts, all the things I went without. They were worth it. Until everything changed in a single moment. I was walking near the outdoor aisle, trying not to disturb anyone, when suddenly someone shoved me, hard. Not a small push. Not an accident. A real shove. My foot slipped instantly on the wet ground. And before I could even react, I fell straight into the mud beside the stage. My suit was ruined in seconds. My hands covered. My face exposed in front of everyone. For a brief moment, everything went silent. Then I heard laughter. Not from strangers. From him. My son-in-law. Standing there, laughing like it was entertainment. Like I was part of the show. I looked up at him, expecting maybe he'd step forward, help me up, say sorry. Anything that would make it feel like a mistake. But instead, he smirked and said, "Relax. It's just mud. Don't make it a big deal." And right here, before I tell you what happened next, if this moment made you feel something, take a second to follow and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I read every message. And trust me, this story doesn't go the way you think. People around us didn't know how to react. Some gave awkward smiles. Others quickly looked away like they didn't want to be involved. And my daughter, she just stood there silent. No reaction. No defense. Nothing. That moment told me more than words ever could. I slowly pushed myself up, mud dripping from my clothes. My hands shaking slightly, not from the fall, but from something deeper. From realizing that sometimes respect doesn't disappear slowly. It disappears all at once. I looked at him again. He was still smiling. Still confident. Still thinking this was nothing. And that's when something inside me went completely calm. No anger. No shouting. No scene. I didn't ruin the wedding. I didn't argue. I didn't even react the way everyone expected. I just looked at him. And smiled. Because sometimes silence isn't weakness. It's the moment a man decides he's done explaining his worth. And what I did next, he never saw coming. I didn't say a word after that. Not to him. Not to anyone. I picked up my jacket, tried to wipe the mud off my hands, and walked toward the side of the venue where no one was really paying attention. A few people glanced at me, then quickly looked away. That's the thing about public humiliation, people don't step in. They just step aside. Behind me, the music started again. Like nothing had happened. Like I hadn't just been pushed to the ground at my own daughter's wedding. I went to the restroom, cleaned myself as much as I could. But there's only so much you can fix when the damage isn't just on your clothes. I looked at myself in the mirror for a long moment. Wet sleeves. Stained shirt. And eyes that didn't look the same anymore. Not angry. Just clear. That kind of clarity only comes when something inside you finally breaks. Or maybe finally wakes up. When I walked back out, the ceremony had already moved on. People were smiling again, taking pictures, enjoying the moment. My son-in-law stood at the center, laughing with his friends like he hadn't just crossed a line. You don't come back from. And my daughter. She was right next to him. Smiling. That hurt more than the fall. Because strangers can disrespect you. But silence from your own blood. That's different. I took my seat quietly. No one asked if I was okay. No one mentioned what happened. It was like the entire moment had been erased, like it only existed in my memory. And maybe in his. Because once or twice, I caught him looking at me with that same confident expression, as if he was waiting for me to react, waiting for me to cause a scene. But I didn't. Because people like him expect noise. They expect anger. They expect you to lose control so they can justify what they did. What they don't expect is patience. Halfway through the reception, he walked past me again. This time slower. This time closer. He leaned in slightly and said under his breath, "You should be more careful next time." Then he smiled and walked away. That was the moment I knew something important. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a joke. This was intention. And once you understand that, everything changes. I sat there quietly, watching the rest of the evening unfold. The speeches, the laughter, the music, all of it felt distant. Like I was no longer part of it. And maybe I wasn't. Because somewhere between that fall and that moment, I stopped being just a guest at that wedding. I became something else. Someone who had seen the truth clearly. And when you see people for who they really are, you stop reacting and start planning. And by the time the night ended, I had already decided exactly what I was going to do. And trust me, it wasn't what anyone expected. I left the wedding early. No goodbyes. No explanations. Just a quiet exit while everyone else was busy, celebrating something that no longer felt like mine. The drive home was silent. Not the kind of silence filled with anger, the kind filled with decisions. Every streetlight I passed felt like a checkpoint between who I was and who I was about to become. By the time I reached home, I wasn't thinking about the fall anymore. I was thinking about patterns. Because moments like that don't come out of nowhere. They build over time. Small signs you ignore. Disrespect you excuse. Words you pretend didn't mean what they clearly did. And suddenly, everything started connecting. The way he spoke to me in private. The way he dismissed my opinions. The way my daughter would stay quiet every time something felt off. I had ignored it all. Because I wanted peace. Because I didn't want to ruin her happiness. Because I believed respect would come with time. It doesn't. Respect comes when it's required. And that night, I decided it would be. The next morning, I didn't call my daughter. I didn't message anyone. Instead, I made one call. "Good morning, Mr. Carter," I said when the line connected. There was a brief pause, then a familiar voice answered. "It's been a while. Everything okay?" "Not exactly," I replied. "But it will be." Mr. Carter had been my lawyer for over 20 years. He handled everything important in my life: the house, the property documents, the investments I never talked about, and most importantly, the things I kept quiet for a reason. "Come by the office," he said. "Bring whatever you think matters." "Oh, I will," I replied. Because this wasn't about emotions anymore. This was about facts. By noon, I was sitting across from him, placing documents one by one on his desk. Property papers. Payment records. Agreements signed years ago that no one remembered, except me. He went through everything slowly, carefully. Then he leaned back and looked at me. "What exactly do you want to do?" I didn't hesitate. "I want to make sure he never laughs at me again." Mr. Carter gave a small, knowing smile. "That can be arranged," he said. Then he opened a file. And inside it was something my son-in-law had completely forgotten about. Something tied directly to that wedding. Something that gave me more power than he ever imagined. I looked at the papers for a moment. And for the first time since that night, I smiled for a real reason. Because the man who pushed me into the mud had no idea. He was standing on something that belonged to me. Mr. Carter slid the document closer to me and tapped the bottom corner. "Do you remember signing this?" he asked. I nodded. Of course I did. Because unlike them, I never forget what I pay for. 3 months before the wedding, my son-in-law had come to me with a small request. He said the venue they wanted was too expensive, and they were short on funds. He spoke politely that day, almost respectfully. Said it was important for my daughter. Said it would mean everything to her. So I agreed. But not blindly. I covered a major portion of the venue payment, quietly. Without making a scene, but I made sure it went through a structured agreement. Not because I didn't trust him, but because I had lived long enough to understand people. The contract was simple. The booking, the advance, the legal responsibility for the venue. All under my name. Not his. Not my daughter's. Mine. Mr. Carter adjusted his glasses. Technically, you are the primary client. The event may be over. But there are still pending settlements, damages, and final clearances tied to your authorization. I leaned back slightly. And? He gave a small smile. And if there's any dispute, misconduct, or violation reported under your event. He paused just long enough. You control how it ends. That's when it clicked. That fall into the mud. It wasn't just humiliation. It was damage. Public misconduct. Negligence tied to an event legally under my name. And more importantly, it was witnessed. I looked at him and asked, "What are my options?" He didn't rush his answer. Official complaint. Venue liability claim. Breach of conduct. Financial penalties. Each word felt heavier than the last. And him? I asked. Mr. Carter closed the file slowly. If pursued properly, it could affect him financially, legally, even professionally, depending on how far you take it. Silence. But this time, it wasn't empty. It was controlled. Because now I wasn't reacting anymore. I was choosing. I stood up and walked toward the window. Thinking about that moment again, the push, the laughter. The way he looked at me like I didn't matter. Then I remembered something else. The way he leaned in later and said, "You should be more careful next time." I smiled slightly. Because he was right. I should have been more careful. Careful about who I trusted. Careful about what I allowed. Careful about how long I stayed silent. I turned back to Mr. Carter. "Start it," I said. He nodded. No surprise. No hesitation. Just action. Because some lessons don't come from words. They come from consequences. And this time, those consequences were going to be official. Filed. Recorded. Impossible to laugh off. And as I walked out of that office, one thing was clear. The man who thought he embarrassed me in public was about to learn what public consequences really look like. The notice reached him in 3 days. Not a phone call. Not a warning. A legal notice. Official. Stamped. Impossible to ignore. I didn't send it to scare him. I sent it to remind him. Because there's a difference. That evening, my phone rang. His name on the screen. For a second, I just looked at it. Then I answered. "What is this?" He snapped, no greeting, no respect, just anger. "A document," I said calmly. "You should read it carefully." "You're suing me? Over a fall?" He laughed, but this time it didn't sound confident. "It wasn't a fall," I replied. "It was a push. In a public event. Under my legal responsibility." Silence. Then louder. "You're seriously doing this? To family?" That word again. Family. It always shows up when consequences arrive. "You didn't treat me like family," I said. "You treated me like something disposable." He tried to shift his tone. "Look, you're overreacting." It was a joke. Everyone laughed. "Exactly," I said. "That's the problem." Another silence. This one heavier. Because now he was thinking. Calculating. Realizing this wasn't something he could brush off. "What do you want?" he finally asked. Not sorry. Not regret. Terms. I almost expected that. "I want you to understand something," I said slowly. That moment wasn't funny. It wasn't small. And it doesn't disappear just because you decide it does. He exhaled hard. Just tell me what you want. Before I could answer, another voice came on the line. My daughter. Dad, please, she said softly. That one word carried everything: fear, pressure, confusion. I closed my eyes for a second. Because this wasn't just about him anymore. It never really was. I gave you everything, I said quietly. Respect, support, trust. And the one time I needed it back, you stood there and said nothing. She didn't respond. Because some truths don't have replies. I'm not doing this to hurt you, I continued. I'm doing this because I should have done it a long time ago. Her voice broke slightly. Can we just talk? Without all this? I thought about it. About the years. About the silence. About the mud still sitting somewhere in my memory. We are talking, I said. Just not in the way you're used to. The call ended shortly after that. No resolution. No agreement. Just tension. But this time, I wasn't the one carrying it. Because for the first time, they were the ones feeling unsure. Worried. Out of control. And that's when I understood something important. The moment you stop accepting disrespect quietly, people start hearing you clearly. And what happened next? Forced them to listen. The meeting was set for the following Monday. Same office. Same people. But this time, no smiles. Mr. Carter laid everything out clearly: legal notice, witness statements, venue report. Every detail documented. Every moment recorded. My son-in-law tried to speak, but this time, no one was laughing. Not him. Not anyone. For the first time since the wedding. He looked nervous. What do you want? He asked again. Same question. Different tone. Before I could answer, my daughter spoke. Dad, I'm sorry. Her voice wasn't loud. But it was real. I saw what happened. I should have said something. I looked at her for a moment. Because sometimes the apology you wait for comes when it's almost too late. Then I turned to him. He avoided my eyes. No jokes. No smirk. No confidence left. I made a mistake, he said quietly. I didn't think it was a big deal. I nodded slowly. That's exactly the problem. Silence filled the room. Everyone waiting. Not for anger. For decision. Mr. Carter looked at me. We can proceed. Or settle. I leaned back in my chair. And for a moment, I let them feel it. The uncertainty. The pressure. The consequences. Then I said, we settle. Relief instantly showed on his face. Too quickly. Too easily. That's when I added, but on my terms. The room went quiet again. I placed a paper on the table. A simple agreement. He read it once. Then again. His expression changed. This is serious, he said. I looked at him calmly. So was what you did. The condition was simple. A formal written apology. Public. In front of both families. At the same venue. Where it happened. No jokes. No excuses. Just truth. He hesitated. Because this wasn't about money. This was about respect. And respect is harder to give back than anything else. My daughter looked at him. Just do it, she said quietly. And for the first time, he listened. A week later, we stood in that same place again. Same aisle. Same ground. But this time, no one was laughing. He stood there, in front of everyone, and apologized. Clearly. Publicly. Properly. And when he finished, he didn't look at the crowd. He looked at me. Because now he understood. Respect isn't given because of age. It's given because someone finally demands it. I didn't say much after that. I didn't need to. Because the man who once pushed me into the mud stood in the same place and rebuilt my respect in front of everyone. And that was enough. Because sometimes, the strongest revenge isn't destroying someone. It's making sure they never forget what they did.